Breaking news this Thursday night, disaster strikes a tiny village.
Oh my God, look at that.
A wildfire engulfs most of Lytton, BC. The destruction, how people escaped.
Go!
And the heartache. Our Robin Gill is near the fire zone. Also, the country's shameful past front and center on Canada Day. The reckoning, the reflections, and the recognition of residential school victims and survivors. Plus, one boy's journey to channel his anger into action.
That could have been me in one of those graves.
And monumental memorial, the new permanent tribute to Diana, the People's Princess.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
We've got to leave town. The town is on fire, Jill. Go!
The panicked escape from Lytton, British Columbia, the village that made headlines this week for record-shattering heat, is now a scene of devastation after being ravaged by a fast-moving wildfire. Good evening, and thank you for joining us as we track this developing story in BC's interior. Tonight, it's still not clear whether everyone made it out of Lytton safely. Families are trying desperately to track down loved ones caught in the chaos, but power outages and poor cell service are making it difficult. According to the MP for the area, at least 2 people have died, and 90% of the village is destroyed. To give you a sense of what that looks like, this was Lytton's main street before the fire, and this is after. The province says most of the homes are gone, as well as the local ambulance station and RCMP detachment. A number of evacuation centres have been set up for the people forced to flee. One of them is east of Lytton in the city of Merritt, and that's where we find our Robin Gill tonight. Robin, what are you hearing from people?
Well, mostly that they're concerned about their loved ones. They want to make sure that they got out safely because it was such a frenetic and chaotic exit from Lytton, and these families are scattered at evacuation centres right around the province that have been set up. But more than anything, there's that staggering stress that they've lost everything. An arena in Merritt, BC is a lifeline for the many who left Lytton with minutes to spare. Star Drynock's father stayed behind to help fight the fire, and she hasn't been able to find him. Have you heard anything from your dad?
No. It's terrifying because I know he wouldn't leave.
Norman Drynock is a retired firefighter and wanted to help save what homes he could.
He chose to stay, and we found out that he was the last one to stay on reserve to fight the fire and save as many houses as he can, and he didn't leave last night.
It was a terrifying escape on a highway obscured by smoke.
Chaotic. You barely see driving through the smoke, and it kept pushing us further toward Kamloops, and it finally chased us right up to here.
The wildfire overwhelmed the village of Lytton, home to about 1,000 people, and Tony Sam has been told his house was reduced to nothing by the flames. Do you know what's happened to your house at all?
Gone, nothing left. It's leveled. There's my mom's house too.
Witnesses say there were sparks from a train coming through and wonder if that caused this wildfire. That'll be part of the investigation. Right now, the focus of firefighters is to stop the flames from spreading. They've come from all across the province.
Basically, when we got here last night, it had started to sort of hold, but from what we understand and what we saw this morning in terms of what the destruction we've seen and the property loss, it seems to have spread really fast.
The province is promising more help to those who've lost everything.
This has been a very difficult day, and the days ahead are going to continue to challenge us.
Star Drynock had just bought a home for her family. Right now, she doesn't even want to think about that.
I woke up this morning. I was like, what do we do? I was like, I know we're safe, but there's like a lost feeling.
Roads to Lytton remain blocked off, and the smoke shrouding the area gives little hope residents can return home anytime soon. As you can see, it's still very windy. Conditions are dry. It's very hot. And this is when fires thrive. And there are so many fires still burning right across the province that the danger isn't over yet. Farah?
Robin Gill in Merritt, BC. Thank you, Robin. And on that note, multiple BC communities are under evacuation orders tonight because of fast-moving wildfires. That includes hundreds of people in Castlegar and Deca Lake who've been ordered to leave their homes immediately. About 100 active wildfires are burning across BC. 75 of them started in the past 2 days. Officials say the extreme heat has made for explosive conditions.
I cannot stress enough how extreme the fire risk is at this time in almost every part of British Columbia. And I urge British Columbians to listen carefully to officials in your communities and follow those directions as best you can.
Many parts of BC are still sweltering in a record-breaking heat wave. There are warnings across much of the province, and they also stretch all the way into northwestern Ontario. Daytime highs are expected to reach the mid-40s in some regions. This level of heat, and for such a long period of time, is unprecedented, and it's expected to stick around until at least the weekend. In Alberta, another First Nation has begun searching for unmarked graves at several residential school sites. The province was home to more residential schools than anywhere in the country. 2 were on the Siksika First Nation, just east of Calgary. And today, on Canada Day, members gathered in that community to honor the children who never came home. Heather Yourex-West reports.
The St. Joseph Indian Residential School was torn down 25 years ago, but its impact continues to be felt across the Siksika First Nation. Leon Cranebear's parents and grandparents attended residential schools. He did too in 1968. He was just 6 years old.
I repressed a lot of those memories. I do talk to my father about his residential school experience. Some of our, are happy moments for him, but there's a lot of sad moments that he doesn't like to talk about.
On the other side of the First Nation, the former Old Sun Residential School still stands. Teddy bears surround 2 teepees that sit in front of the school. It was here that members of the Siksika First Nation hosted a public tribute to the children who attended these schools, a somber Canada Day gathering that attracted hundreds of visitors, including Cowessess First Nation Chief Cadmus Delorme. 1 week after he announced 751 unmarked graves were discovered near the site of the Merritt Residential School in Saskatchewan. In Regina, Prairie Crow had hoped to gather 751 backpacks to display on the steps of the provincial legislature, in the end collecting more than 800.
It's remarkable because, like I said, I honestly didn't think we'd get to this goal when I put out the 147 about the other night, and then now we've way surpassed it, so it just makes me proud of our community.
The Siksika First Nation is now working with ground-penetrating radar technicians to conduct surveys on lands near these residential schools, as well as on lands near 2 other boarding schools that date back to the 1800s. They've asked for privacy through this process, but plan to make any findings public at a later date. Cranebear isn't sure what will be found, but it's time, he says, this important work is finally done.
Those, lost children or unmarked graves, have to have proper burial, and acknowledgement, recognition that, they're found in a sense.
Found, honored, and remembered. A painful chapter of Canada's past front and center on this Canada Day. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Siksika First Nation, Alberta.
An investigation is also underway into a fire at a Catholic church on the Siksika First Nation on Monday. And overnight, 10 Catholic churches in Calgary were vandalized. Police are investigating. Orange and red paint was smeared across the front doors and walls of the churches. Police say handprints and the number 215 and other markings suggest the attacks are in response to the recent discovery of unmarked graves at former residential school sites. It has been 154 years since Canada became a country. And today is normally filled with jubilant celebrations. But this year, many Canadians, including the Prime Minister, are spending the day reckoning with Canada's treatment of Indigenous peoples.
And we, as Canadians, must be honest with ourselves about our history. Because in order to chart a new and better path forward, we have to recognize the terrible mistakes of our past.
Parliament Hill would normally be packed with people celebrating Canada Day. But as Mike Le Couteur explains, this year, The atmosphere is very different.
A sense of quiet reflection hung over Parliament Hill on this Canada Day morning as people came to see the memorial to victims of residential schools. The pandemic already pausing celebrations here. Most other displays were muted this year too.
I need to figure out something that would help me heal because I'm hurting. So this is the idea I had.
He only wants to be identified as Dave, and his message of inclusion was just as simple. He crafted Canadian flags with colored ribbons in memory of Indigenous children and to honor the family killed in the anti-Muslim attack in London, Ontario, and he handed them out to children.
Today I resolved that, you know what, today I got to do something that's positive. I got to do something that's going to make me feel good.
Down the street, a march to cancel Canada Day made its way to Parliament Hill. Demonstrators with a simple message for anyone resisting the reframing of this day.
Oh, they're scared just because they can't party anymore. This is more important than Canada Day.
It would seem that sentiment is being felt. Mixed in with the traditional red and white garb was a lot of orange, a recognition that this day doesn't bring joy for all.
We feel it important to show up supporting Canada's actual history and what happened.
But beyond that, there is a call for more action, not just in what people wear, but more in what they do.
I want to see Canada change its actions, change its mind, change its tone, and that they will honor the first peoples of this land.
A past people need to recognize if we have any chance at building a better future together. Mike Le Couteur, Global News, Ottawa.
While many spent today reflecting, others celebrated, and not just because of Canada Day. People in Alberta, BC, and Newfoundland and Labrador are enjoying a much-anticipated easing of COVID-19 restrictions.
Today, Alberta is open for summer.
In Calgary, it was a party-like atmosphere with Premier Jason Kenney celebrating the start of Alberta's third and final stage of its reopening plan. Nearly all restrictions have been lifted. The Calgary Stampede is able to go ahead, and there are no more limits on indoor and outdoor gatherings in restaurants, stores, and places of worship. BC too has opened up, removing limits on dining. Masks are also no longer mandatory. And Newfoundland and Labrador has reopened to non-essential travelers from outside Atlantic Canada. And if an international flight is on your mind, the European Union is adding Canada to its safe travel list, opening the door to non-essential travel to the region. Canada is just one of 10 countries that have been added to the list. It's still up to member states to determine if they would like to reopen their borders to tourists. Concerns have been raised about the EU's new vaccine passport system. The Covishield brand of the AstraZeneca vaccine, which more than 270,000 Canadians have received, is not approved for use in Europe. The search in Florida briefly suspended. Coming up, why crews had to pause the recovery mission at a collapsed condo. Plus, lawsuit dropped. Why the fan who caused this crash is no longer being sued. Crews at the site of that deadly condo building collapse in Florida resumed the rescue mission late today after the search was suspended over fears about the stability of the remaining structure. Before that happened, President Joe Biden met with the families of the 142 people still missing about the agonizing and heartbreaking delay 1 week on from this sudden collapse. Here's Jackson Proskow.
Minutes before the collapse, witnesses saw water pouring into the building's underground garage.
Oh my God.
Moments later, they were surrounded by complete devastation. 1 week on, with dozens, including 4 Canadians, still missing, the dangerous rescue effort was stopped for 18 hours over fears the rest of the building could collapse at any moment.
And our engineers are continuing to monitor the structure as we've paused operations to evaluate the situation and all possible options and next steps.
As families of the missing agonize over what might be, firefighters revealed that in the hours after the collapse, they heard a woman crying out from the rubble.
And they were searching for a female voice is what we heard for several hours, and eventually we didn't hear her voice anymore.
The victims recovered and identified include 2 children, ages 4 and 10, along with their parents.
What you're doing here is incredible.
President Joe Biden, a man intimately familiar with loss, met with relief workers, visited a growing public memorial, and sat privately with the families for hours.
They're praying and pleading that, God, let there be a miracle. Let there be something happen for me that's good.
A federal investigation will involve examining hundreds of tons of debris, now slowly being trucked away from the collapse site to an undisclosed location for analysis. As engineers work to stabilize the rest of the building, they face another looming threat. A tropical storm has formed in the Atlantic and could track into South Florida early next week. Farah.
Jackson Proskow in Surfside, Florida. Thank you, Jackson. Former U.S. President Donald Trump's company and its longtime finance chief have been charged in what prosecutors called a sweeping and audacious tax fraud scheme. The indictment accuses the company of a long-running conspiracy to help executives, including Chief Financial Officer Alan Weisselberg, evade taxes on perks and bonuses, while at the same time decreasing the company's own tax obligations. Donald Trump says his company's actions were standard practice and in no way a crime. Trump has not been charged at this stage of the investigation. Still ahead, a new statue in honor of Princess Diana brings a royal rift back into the spotlight.
Oh, a huge crash.
That massive crash at the Tour de France on Saturday is apparently causing too much commotion for the race's organizers. They're withdrawing the lawsuit against the spectator who took down dozens of cyclists with her cardboard sign. French police are still investigating, and the 30-year-old French woman could face up to 2 years in jail. Race organizers say they're dropping the complaint because the story has been blown out of proportion. Prince William and Harry put differences aside during the unveiling of a statue in honor of their mother on what would have been Princess Diana's 60th birthday. As Crystal Gamansing reports, the statue is a lasting tribute to reflect Diana's courage and compassion that defined the people's princess.
Their mother, so often a unifying force, once again had the royal brothers within arm's reach as they honored the woman they and their country love so dearly. For many, this is how they choose to remember Diana, Princess of Wales, a doting mother, a fashion icon, and a champion of the sick and underprivileged. A joint statement was shared and posted on social media by Prince William and Prince Harry saying, "Every day we wish she were still with us, and our hope is that this statue will be seen forever as a symbol of her life and her legacy." But the brothers' relationship and their highly publicized feud could end up being all that's talked about in the days ahead.
I hope that we can keep the focus there, but there's no doubt that there will be some talk about the drama, some talk about why Meghan's not there, why Kate's not there. You know, if the brothers stand next to each other, don't stand next to each other, if they speak, if they don't speak.
Backs were turned while the princes greeted guests and their mother's siblings. But they also stood together, chatted, smiled, and paid tribute to the woman they dearly wish was still in their lives. The sculptor said, "We wanted to capture her warmth and humanity while showcasing the impact she has had across generations." Everyone can now pay tribute to the people's princess. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Next, the 11-year-old boy in Nova Scotia who's walking for 6 days to send one powerful message. An 11-year-old boy in Nova Scotia began his long journey today in memory of victims and survivors of residential schools. Landon Toney will travel more than 100 kilometers by foot. Landon is being accompanied by his mom and cousin, and he's encouraging others to join along. As Ross Lord reports, he hopes his walk will serve as an inspiration.
At age 11, Landon Toney already has the strength of his convictions. Landon is walking for 6 days, 157 kilometers from his house in Valley, Nova Scotia to the Annapolis Valley First Nation. It's his way of honoring victims and survivors of residential schools.
It doesn't feel right, like, that there was kids my age that were dying from older people. Like, they got whipped and stuff when they were bad, and they couldn't go home, and if they tried to, they would either get killed or punished.
Landon is channeling his anger into positive action.
I just want people to feel better about themselves, and I just want people to know what's going on and that it wasn't too long ago too. Like, that could have been me in one of those graves.
His mother, Marcia McClellan, is helping coordinate Landon's journey of awareness, creating an online fundraiser and joining the walk to make sure her son stays safe.
He's proud to be who he is, and he wants others to be proud of who they are, and he wants people to learn the truth.
A painful truth for Landon and his Mi'kmaq ancestors. His great-grandmother was a survivor of the residential school in nearby Shubenacadie, where a search for remains that started last year continues. His cousin Keaton is also joining the walk.
It shows people how strong we are and how much we will stand up for our rights and for our heritage.
With this journey, Landon is stepping into new territory.
I do sports, but I never went for a long walk in my life.
But embarking on this challenge will be worthwhile, he says, if it helps others. Ross Lord, Global News.
Landon, you give us hope for the future. And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Farah Nasser. Thank you so much for spending part of your Canada Day with us. We leave you tonight with orange tributes from across the country. Orange letters spell out "Every Child Matters" on a busy street in Vancouver, BC, to honor the survivors and victims of residential schools. And the tower at the Canadian Museum of Human Rights is shining orange in Winnipeg. Wishing you peace this Canada Day, however you choose to commemorate.